Okay, welcome 5th graders to another video science test review lesson. And this lesson is going to be on elements, right? So the first thing we need to talk about is what exactly an element is. Now an element is a substance that can not be further simplified or cut into pieces. Once again, an element is a substance that cannot be further simplified or cut into pieces. And the reason is it cannot be further simplified or cut into any smaller pieces is because that if you were to cut it into smaller pieces, it would no longer be that substance anymore. Okay? For example, let's say you had this big piece of aluminum. Alright? Now this piece of aluminum is made up of a whole bunch of aluminum atoms. Now let's say for the sake of this lesson, okay, we're kind of pretending here. Let's say aluminum is made up of 2 protons and 3 neutrons. Okay, so it needs these 5 things. In order for it to be an aluminum atom, it needs 2 protons and 3 neutrons, which equals 5. Okay, so this big piece of aluminum is made up of a whole bunch of aluminum atoms. And each aluminum atom has to have those 5 things. 2 protons and 3 neutrons. Okay? So if you were to cut this piece of aluminum, and now you have this smaller piece of aluminum, you still have atoms that are made up of those 5 things. Each one of the atoms that make up this piece of aluminum must have those 5 things. Okay? So even though you cut this bigger piece of aluminum and you get this smaller piece of aluminum, you still have atoms that have those 5 things. 2 protons, 3 neutrons. Let's say I cut this piece of aluminum again. And now let's say I have a very, very small piece of aluminum. Actually, this is the smallest piece of aluminum you can get. And this is kind of what I was talking about at the beginning of this lesson. This piece of aluminum only has 1 atom. Okay, this piece of aluminum is only 1 atom. But once again, this atom, this piece of aluminum, which is 1 atom now, still must have these 5 things. 2 protons and 3 neutrons. Okay? So once again, this piece of aluminum, which is made up of 1 atom, still has the 5 things. Okay? So once again, this was made up of a whole bunch of aluminum atoms that have those 5 things. You cut it, this piece of aluminum is still made up of aluminum atoms that have those 5 things. And this piece of aluminum now is only 1 atom, but it still has those 5 things. If you were to cut this atom, this aluminum atom, into any smaller pieces, it would no longer be aluminum anymore because you would have to take away one of these 5 things. If you take away a neutron, it's no longer aluminum anymore. If you take away one of the protons, it's no longer aluminum anymore. You have to have those 5 things. So it cannot be simplified or cut into any smaller pieces. So that's what an element is. It's a substance, like aluminum, that cannot be cut into any more pieces and it still be aluminum, because once you took away one of the other ones, it would no longer be aluminum anymore. Okay, so that's the key thing. Aluminum is a substance that cannot be broken into any smaller pieces, because then it would no longer be aluminum, because then you'd only have 4 and you need the 5. Okay? Alright, that's probably the hardest part of the lesson, understanding what an element is. So if you got that, you're awesome. Now let's talk about what elements make up most living things. You can see the people here, you can see the dog, you can see the flower. Most living things are made up of these 3 elements: hydrogen, carbon, and oxygen. Most living things are made up of those 3 things. You're going to need to know that for the test. you also need to know that matter is made up of elements. Okay? Matter is made up of elements. Elements are made up of atoms, especially after what we talked about up here. You know that for our example, aluminum is made up of those, well, aluminum is one atom that's made up of those 5 things. Okay? But for the test, you will need to know, once again, that elements are made up of atoms. Okay? Matter is made up of atoms. Elements is matter. Okay? You also need to know that what makes up the earth. Okay? Over here was living things. Now what things make up earth? Okay? We have water makes up a majority of the earth. Air makes up a majority of the earth. And crust makes up a majority of the earth. We're not talking about living things now. We're talking about like earth, like the dirt, the water, the trees, and that sort of thing. Water, air, and crust. Those are the 3 things that make up most of the earth. Okay? As far as what makes up water, you have hydrogen, oxygen, and some other elements. What makes up air is oxygen, nitrogen, and some other smaller elements. And then you have crust, which is made up of oxygen, silicon, and other elements. Just so you know, here's some other fairly common elements as well. We have oxygen, silicon, aluminum, iron, calcium, sodium, potassium, and magnesium. Those are other kinds of elements. Well, that is the Elements Science Test Review for 5th grade. If you have any questions, once again, feel free to contact me on my website. You can go to Edmodo. You can go to the Contact Mr. P section where there's actually a button or a link on there that goes directly to my cell phone. There's also Facebook, and these lessons are found on iTunes. Unless you're watching this on iTunes, then you already know about that. But if you're watching this through my class website, go to the iTunes store and search Passafume in the little search box, and it will bring up all of these video lessons. Then you can actually plug in your MP3 player like your iPod or your iPad or your iPhone, and you can watch these videos on the road. Okay, you can watch them when you're driving around with your parents, while you're walking to school. You can listen to it while you're riding your bike in one ear only. You got to keep your ear open just for safety reasons. But anyways, hope you've enjoyed this lesson and you do well on the test.